But first tonight, the headline, a much weaker than expected jobs report. My hunch is that Obama is not too thrilled about it either. CNBC's own John Harwood joins us now with all the details. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Larry. No, I don't think the White House is too thrilled about it, but it won't surprise you, Larry, to know that they don't have the same spin on these numbers that you do. But we've got to get used to that, because this is the kind of jobs report that is weak enough that it can be spun any way you please. Let's start with the top line numbers. First of all, the overall unemployment rate went down from 8.1 to 8.2 to 8.1%, that is. So far, so good. 115,000 non-farm payroll jobs added. That's okay. But then you look at the household survey. Household survey shows 169,000 fewer people with jobs and 342,000 people leaving the labor force, in part because of retirements, in part because of the expiration of unemployment benefits, which require you to search for a job. So President Obama was out on the campaign trail, and he had to take ownership of both sides of that, to take credit for progress that's been made, but also acknowledge that more has to be done. Here's the president.
4.2 million new jobs over the last 26 months. More than 1 million jobs in the last 6 months alone. So that's the good news, but there's still a lot of folks out of work, which means that we've got to do more.
So, Larry, that's what the incumbent president says, but if you're Mitt Romney, the presumptive Republican nominee, you're only focused on the weakness and the shortcomings in this report. Here's Mitt Romney on the trail today.
This is a sad time in America when people who want work can't find jobs. College kids coming out of college. Surveys said half of the kids coming out of college can't find work, or can't find work that's consistent with their skills. This is a time when America wants to have someone who knows what it takes to create jobs and get people working again.
So, Larry, this is what the underlying analytical issue behind these numbers, whether or not the favorable weather in the early part of the year had pushed forward job creation, then pushed down these numbers now. Question is, what is the run rate going to be toward Election Day, and will that unemployment rate go down further? Talked to Mark Zandi today. He said it'll be at around 7.9 on Election Day. He has a more sanguine view, but Doug Holtz-Eakin, good friend of both of ours who advised President Bush, he's much more concerned that this shows weakness in the job market that is also going to persist to Election Day, Larry.
All right, John, I think you laid it out. I appreciate it very much. I think you laid it out beautifully. Many thanks to our own John Harwood in Washington, D.C. Now, as John reported, Mitt Romney jumped at the chance to say he can do better than the president. Take a listen to Romney.
The reason the rate came down was because about 340,000 people dropped out of the workforce. So many became discouraged they stopped looking for work. This is a time when America wants to have someone who knows what it takes to create jobs and get people working again. I think it helps to have had a job, to create a job, and I have, and I will.
All right, me, I don't see how Obama can get reelected 186 days from now. 2% growth in GDP, 115,000 jobs, a shrinking workforce, $6 trillion of debt. Somebody's got to explain to me how exactly he's going to do this. So we have Democratic pollster and strategist Bernard Whitman. We bring in Terry Jeffries, CNS News editor-in-chief, and CNBC contributor James Pethokoukis of the American Enterprise Institute. Bernard, I go to you first. Pathetic job number today. Lousy job number last month, lousy GDP number, people dropping out of the workforce left and right, and on top of all that, you got $5 or $6 trillion of new debt for programs of spending that have done the American economy absolutely no good. Bernard, I do not see how President Obama, with polls in the mid-40s, can possibly win.
Well, Larry, no surprise you're wrong once again, and let me explain why. The fact is the job numbers aren't where they need to be yet, but the economy is fundamentally sound and growing, and let me explain the reasons for that. First of all, we've had 26 straight months of job growth compared to almost 4.5 million jobs lost under President Bush. For an economy to really grow and prosper and for jobs to be created, you need three things. You need confidence in the financial markets, and today's sell-off notwithstanding, the Dow and the S&P had their best quarter in 14 years last quarter. NASDAQ best in 20 years, number one. Number two, consumers. Consumers 8 months ago, 2/3 of them nearly thought the economy was still in a downturn. Today, 2/3 of them think the economy has stabilized or is on its way to recovery. Third information point that's key, small businesses. Small businesses have not been this confident and this optimistic about their future expectations in 4 years.
Some amazing statistics, Larry.
According to the Wells Fargo and the Gallup poll,
no filibuster, Bernard. No filibuster,
Bernard.
Otherwise, we will take your mic down. You know you can't do that on this show. Factually, the small business household employment fell 169,000. Last month, it fell also 31,000. Jimmy P., it's one of many indicators going the wrong way, and I want to bring in something that Mitt Romney said on the campaign trail today, and that is, after 3.5 years, are you really better off? It is still the economy, Romney says, and people aren't stupid. What's your take on this?
They're not stupid. You ask people how they feel about the... Listen, if all you knew was looking at those consumer confidence numbers, those numbers are still at the levels that you see during a recession. And no wonder why. Not only are we still in the longest streak of 8% plus unemployment since the Great Depression, incomes have gone nowhere for 2 years. And listen, I know the unemployment rate has fallen. That's only because this government is disappearing workers faster than an old-fashioned South American dictatorship. They're just disappearing these people. They're not counting them anymore. So you have very little job growth. You have no income growth. Listen, if the rest of the year is going to be like April and March, you're right. Mitt Romney's going to win.
That's the point. Jimmy P., just real quickly. What does it mean that the workforce is disappearing? The participation rate is way down. The employment worker population is way down. As John Harwood accurately reported, even in today's report, civilian labor force dropped 342,000. Last week it dropped 164,000. And the so-called broader unemployment rate, which is the underemployment rate, is still 14.5%. Are those facts related? People withdrawn from the labor force, so the real unemployment rate continues around 15%. Is that what's going on here?
Listen, once you've been out of work for a long enough time, they just quit counting you. They figure you just don't have an interest in going back to work, so they don't quit counting you. That 8.1% number, listen, it's really more like 10 if you do a little if you smooth out those labor force participation rates. And really, the real number, because when you count underemployment, as you said, that's 14.5%. If this president wants to go in re-election saying, listen, 14.5% unemployment, good enough, I'm working on it, well, we'll see.
Terry Jeffrey, look, I acknowledge the Democratic National Committee White House talking points that nearly 4 million new jobs have been created by Team Obama. I mean, at least under their aegis. But you know, Terry, at a similar point in the Ronald Reagan recovery, there were over 9 million jobs that had been created. And per month, Terry Jeffrey, Reagan was experiencing 400,000 increases, not 115,000. Now, Terry, I want to know, do you think that Mitt Romney can make this case stick? That's the key point. Can he persuade people that he's the guy with specific items to make this case stick?
Absolutely, I think he can make it stick, Larry, because I think people see it in their real everyday lives. You know, you made the point that the economy was growing strongly when Ronald Reagan was running for re-election back in 1984. This afternoon, I went and looked at the historical statistics for unemployment when presidents are running for re-election in the post-war era. We have not had a president seek re-election with an unemployment above 8% since World War II. In 1984, when Ronald Reagan sought re-election, unemployment was at 7.7%. In April of '84. That's pretty high. But the GDP grew at 8% in the first quarter of 1984. As you said, we have 2.2% economic growth. That's not going to drive unemployment down. Unless we have a serious spurt in economic growth between now and the election, I think this guy's going to have real trouble getting reelected.
See, Bernard, the big point here is whether Obama's policies have failed dismally. The big spending policy, the Obama policy, the threats to tax the rich policy, the EPA policy to crucify oil and gas. In other words, he's going to have to be accountable not only for the slumping numbers. He had a couple of good months. That's it. The numbers are going the wrong way. But the policies behind the numbers, and in particular, all this debt that Americans have been saddled with from all that spending got us what, Bernard? One of the worst economic recoveries in post-war history.
You know, Larry, if you want to shake your finger at someone, I'll tell you who to shake your finger at. You on the right always complain government doesn't create jobs, private enterprise does. Well, let's take a look at private enterprise. Record profits, hoarding cash. Why aren't private corporations in the United States investing in America and creating jobs with the cash that's sitting on their balance sheet?
Because they're terrified of the tax increases on their way. They're terrified of Obamacare. They're terrified of the spending and the debt. Thank you for asking the right question, because they're terrified of where economic policy is going under this president.
No, because they're hoarding cash. They're hoarding cash, and they fail to invest in America. If you want to be angry with someone, talk to the corporations. Get them to invest.
Don't you see that answer? Why? Why? Because economics doesn't happen on stock exchanges. Economics doesn't happen at markets. Economics happens between your ears.
Economics
your perception of
your
risk.
mind.
And the perception of risk by the private sector is they are worried to death where policy is heading.
Go ahead, Terry.
There's a very good and very clear measure of the effectiveness of President Obama's policies. January 2009, his top economic advisor, Christina Romer, published a report. Anybody can go look at it. She said if Congress enacted the $787 billion stimulus Obama wanted, unemployment would never exceed 8%. The next month, it ticked up to 8.3. Congress passed the bill. We haven't had a single month in Obama's presidency when unemployment has been below 8%. That stimulus was a total disaster. Every penny was borrowed from the Chinese and the Japanese. Our great-grandkids are going to be paying interest on that.
Unemployment rate should be 5.5%.
Gentlemen, I got to leave it there. Bernard Whitman, thank you. Terry Jeffrey, Jimmy Pethokoukis. All I'll say is today's numbers, another lousy month of job creation, opens the door wider for Mitt Romney to become the next president. Up next on Kudlow, new federal rules on fracking. This could be overrunning the states. We'll have Wyoming's star governor join us to give us his view. Also ahead on the Kudlow Report, investors unnerved by today's bad jobs report. Will our spring stall turn into the summer doldrums? And later on in the show, when will my great friend Robert Reich admit that big government, Keynesian spending, Obamonomics has been an abject, utter failure? We will have the Bob Reich, Steve Moore debate when we return. And don't forget, folks, it's my theme. We must turn back to free market capitalism because it's the best path to prosperity. The other team has lost badly. They are discredited. It's time for a change. I'm Larry Kudlow. We'll be right back.